Okay.
Yay.
Yay. Okay. We're good. And we have more people now.
Yeah. Do you want to go ahead and do the little intro, say what day it is and all that, and we'll get started?
All right. Hello, everyone. This is our Thursday call for what happened to Manna. We're happy that you're all here, and we are recording this. So today's agenda is primarily focused on Manna itself. We're going to address some of the history of what happened to Manna, what the legal status of Manna is now, and then also what has happened to Manna's assets, namely Manna Stats. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sarita. Thank you. Oh, no, I'm turning it over to
Yeah.
Lori. I'm sorry. Woo. Hi, Lori, and I'd like to introduce you guys to Lori Barkledge, who has for the last two calls helped us with identifying and releasing or integrating our trauma responses around this traumatic event, and allowed us to be able to integrate that so that we can actually use that to help us fuel our healing. And so, Lori, I don't know if you want to do a little intro about you. I should have probably done that. I'm sorry, but
No, I realize too that people are coming into this. Hopefully, they have listened to the entire series. So I feel like we already did intros and stuff. I
okay.
probably am going to go ahead and read through the full list of our intention setting. I know last week I felt like I did a shorter version. And since we've got different people on the call now than we had before, for those who are here, they're hearing it for the first time. I want to go ahead and include that. So if that's okay, I'm just going to go ahead and include that. It may take a couple extra minutes, but shouldn't be too long.
Thank you, Lori. That'd be great.
Okay. So first of all, I invite everybody to just take a minute and let's turn our bodies into receivers. Right this minute, we may have been running from here to there. We've been elsewhere. We want to bring ourselves into here and now. I want to breathe really deeply, as deeply as you can. And I want to acknowledge that when we've been talking about some of this stuff, we may find ourselves breathing more shallow, and sometimes just taking a good deep breath can tell our body that it's safe. So, right this minute, we're going to take one deep breath. And then a second deep breath. We're going to set our intention that this time we spend together, integrating and healing, examining, trying to figure out how we can best work together, blocking whatever's keeping that from happening. All of this is on behalf of ourselves, our ancestors, and our descendants, our families, our coworkers, our communities, the families we work with, and anyone who would benefit from this. Yes, this session is going to address whatever keeps us from working together in the best interests of families, whatever keeps the community as a whole from recognizing birth as a human right available to everyone, and whatever we perceive as having been lost through the process of Manna folding, and whatever. We're here to answer the question, what happened? So we're going to take 2 minutes and set intentions as individuals and as a group. So for a minute or so, it's going to look like trauma dumping. It's not. Reach back in the corners and scrape everything out, the stuff you maybe don't want to say out loud. It might sound petty or confused or uninformed. We're going to put everything that comes to mind into that circle so that we can put our intention there. These will be statements and comments giving voice to frustrations you've had with what's been revealed in this whole process. You can keep them to yourself, and I invite you to place them in the chat. Be aware the chat is saved, and you can send them privately to me if you want to keep them anonymous and yet let them be spoken. There is a power in having it spoken. You can send them privately to me, though, if you want to keep them anonymous, and they can be posted to the whole group if you want to invite the group's visual focus. For now, let's not try to read everything everybody's posting. I will read through them as we do this session. So just, kind of head down, start typing in anything that comes to you as something that you would love to see revealed so that we can see it and address it. I'm going to watch the timer so you don't have to. I'm setting my timer right this second. And it went long enough that it scrolled off my screen again. Okay, let me find it again. So 2 minutes. We're just going to put everything we can in the chat, either in the group or privately to me is fine. And go. All right, that's our 2 minutes. Feel free to continue to type in there if something comes to mind as we're talking or as we're doing this session. We don't have to know, may have seen that we were writing a lot of statements about this, whatever happened with this. We don't have to know whatever that is right now. Our bodies, our energy in our community, our relationships know. And sometimes we don't want to talk about those things. We don't want to know. It's scary and it's sad and it's frustrating. But we're going to allow those statements to all flow past us right now. We're merely observing them and allowing them. We are going to save the chat so individual bits can be delved into later from an intention of healing. And if anyone has had something so big come up that they want to have additional time, just drop me a private note and I would be willing to set aside the time to work with you directly. So right now, I'm going to review the chat with you. Like I said, you don't have to read all of this. But what we are going to do, I'm not going to delve into the whys and hows. We don't know why it works. We just know that on brain scans, it's proving what ancient traditions have known is that there's power in turning our energy and our energy back in on ourselves, focus it back in here. At the same time, we're unplugging from all of these things that we've been powering because when we have a frustration of the future or a frustration of the past, our energy right now is scattered. We've got energy cords going out here and going out here. And I want to bring our energy into now because that's the only way we're going to be able to figure out how we can focus. Because at some point, it's just too exhausting. That means you've got too many plugs plugged in to things you may not even have any control over. So, what we're going to do is we're going to place one hand on the back of our heads like we're cradling a baby's head. Everyone here knows how to do that. And then we're going to take our thumb and place it on a tear duct. And we're going to take the ring finger and place it on another tear duct. There's gentle hold. There's no pressure in any of this. Or gently hold. You can rest these fingers up here if you want, or you can hold them aside. Either way. Really, what we're doing is we're creating a gentle current. We're setting our intention with the current. Again, I can go on for weeks about this part. So we're just going to know that this happens, that your vision center and your basically the center of everything that goes on with your body, your regulation, all that goes all kind of comes in and goes in here. If you study traditional Chinese medicine, a lot happens right in here. So we're going to connect those two right now. Breathing as deeply as you feel comfortable doing. Please don't try and force it. That could be a trauma response as well. Don't even question why you can't breathe so deeply right now. Just breathe as deep as you can while I read these statements. If your arms get tired, you can bring your hands down to your heart. The lack of transparency is leading to distrust. Let's build trust by being vulnerable and authentic. All of the dysfunction means we can't ever work together again. Women can't be in community. We're all too wounded. There's no way to bridge the communication gaps we've seen. We feel betrayed. It's scary to try and work together. We've been hurt too often. Let's try telling the truth. I'm going to go back because I left out a powerful word here. Let's just try telling the damn truth. Teach correct principles and allow people to govern themselves. I didn't want to take the power from that. The thoughts that this can't be safe. Any thoughts we have just about being disappointed in the leadership of MANA, MEEK, ICM? Any thoughts that they don't have professional person ethics to address this issue publicly? All our disappointments, the loss of potential, which I see we're feeling very deeply because the whole community has lost something. The thought that this could be used against us at some point. Who doesn't want us to work together and why? The frustrations we have that a small group of individuals were able to put their own agenda above the best interests of the community. And we're sad about the time we've lost as a group, moving our work forward while we're stuck in conflict. And anyone who's been to any of my workshops or spent any time with me in any groups, I tend to say, it's the trauma. You hear me say it all the time. And each of these things is absolutely the patterns of trauma that have been created and are our default if we don't work consciously to shift them. Part of that is saying what they are, recognizing them. You can't address something you can't see. And if you turn off the lights and there's a mosquito in the room, you can't get him. You're not going to be able to get him because he's out there and you can't see him. Turn on the lights so you can get him, squish him, make him stop being an issue. So we're turning the light on the mosquitoes here. And as we have our meeting, if you start to feel like anything is really big, go ahead and put your hands over your heart. Deep breathe into it and just let that go through you as something somebody said. It's not necessarily about you. It doesn't have to be something you have to solve right now. We're just shining the light. So thank you everybody for allowing me the honor of being in this space with you. If you start to feel overwhelmed, please continue to just bear with me, send me a little side note here, or feel free to drop me an email. And we will have a little wrap up session at the very end because we're about to bring up some more stuff. So thank you for bringing the light to these things so we can make space for some additional without overwhelm. Thank you. I don't know who's now back to you, whoever is next.
I'll go.
Thank you, Lori. All right, Sarita, thanks.
I'll just kind of lead us through these next agenda topics, if that's okay. And the first thing we were going to do is kind of follow up from last week's Zoom and do any FAM updates so that we can wrap that up. I know that last week, Barbara Grace, you were very frustrated, as we all were, because your microphone wasn't working. And I know both you and Lori, and I believe Deb, have added things to the timeline that Lori started. So if the three of you could give us some idea of what those updates are and what you want to tell us, that'd be great. Barbara Grace, you want to go first?
Sure. Okay, can you hear me? Oh my gosh, it's a miracle. Okay, just really quick. First off, I never was approved as an official FAM board member. That was a whole nother side issue. Peter Bullock and I never got approved as board members, but we pretended we were anyway, and we did the work. Really quickly, I just wanted to go through some of the things that FAM was working on. From the end of 2022 until May of 2023, FAM met weekly for 2 hours to plan for our spring grant making, and we were so excited. We were looking forward to giving Jenny Joseph a grant for her center. We were planning to give a grant to a Parteras group in Mexico who was in desperate need. We didn't have a chance to come up with an amount for them because it couldn't be so large that it would attract the cartel radar. We were looking into Indigenous birth workers in need of help with their midwifery training. We were planning on giving a grant to Kiki Jordan, who's a midwife of color in the East Bay of California. We wanted to give a grant to Shafia Monroe in Oregon for her center and teaching outreach, as well as to the BIPOC student midwifery group. We did wind up giving a grant to Elena Snell Broach, who is a new midwife in New Jersey. She's in an area where there's not a lot of midwifery coverage, and we did give her a grant for 1 semester of her midwifery training. But beyond that, no grants were given, just that one. We tried all of April and into May to set up a mutual time for a MANA FAM meeting. We had no response from anyone in MANA to any of our requests, emails, phone, etc. And sadly, we were really disheartened that only 143 people signed our petition to request a mediation meeting with MANA. So that petition's still up, but we were hoping that would kind of push the needle a little bit, but it didn't. In mid-May, well, FAM is a Connecticut registered 5013C. Dan Graham filed a report against the Westport, Connecticut branch of Morgan Stanley, which is where our accounts were, for unethical violations because he allowed a phone call from a third party, Vicki Headley, who was not on our current signatory cards, to she requested that he freeze our accounts, and he did not call us and let us know about that. And we weren't informed, in fact, until the end of May when we tried to pull money out to actually give all these grants, and the accounts were frozen. So they did follow up with a letter to us, but they didn't admit any wrongdoing, and nothing has happened from there. In fact, they required that FAM come up with a court order to get our funds back, which he should have requested a court order from MANA to get the funds frozen in the first place. But of course, we couldn't do that because we had no money to hire a lawyer to litigate. So then in September, September 18th, I filed a complaint with the state of Washington, which is where MANA is registered. And the 3 citations in my complaint were attempted misappropriation of funds, illegal removal of board members, and fiscal malfeasance. And the amount entered was for $78,000. We've sent a follow-up letter to the state of Washington, and same thing, crickets, nothing. We've heard nothing. So that's kind of what we've done in the last year and a half, almost 2 years. And yeah, so no trauma there.
Thank you. That was a lot of people that were depending on FAM to help fund them. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Lori, I see a hand. Did you
I had a
wanted to add?
question. When you say that you communicated with them, was this via email? Were these snail mail? I just got some questions because we know that their infrastructure had kind of crumbled. They weren't getting emails. So were those sent as snail mails, or you said phone calls, but when you sent communication, I was just curious if you could enlighten us how reach them. And now the mower outside, I'm gonna
Well, of course, we sent to their MANA emails with, and a lot of those bounced back. And then several of the gals got together and found other emails, personal emails for the current board under Becky Coolidge. Same thing, no answers. A couple people were called, and I don't have that in my notes right now exactly who was called, but they definitely were board members at the time. Phone calls, no answer, no response, left messages. So it was emails to both the MANA accounts for the officers as well as their personal, and phone calls. So
thank you. I just want
yeah,
to make sure we weren't talking about emails that went into the ether and they didn't even know they were getting them. So thank you
right.
for clarifying.
Yeah, thank you. Lori, did you have things you wanted to add to the FAM timeline? I know you've added MANA things. We can talk about that next.
Sure. I went ahead and I was able to go ahead and add some keywords and things I added. So this timeline has grown exponentially. Just my brain needed to try and get things like what did happen. And in wanting to prepare for these calls, maybe 3 weeks or so ago, I started to figure out who were the people. Like I would be talking and somebody would say, "Oh, so and so," and I'm like, "I don't even know who that is. Were they on the board?" And of course, you can't check the website to see who used to be on the board. So I started going back through. I went to Connecticut where FAM was registered and went through and looked up their paperwork. I went through old FAM newsletters and I could glean quite a bit from there. I then went through the FAM Facebook page and I grabbed screenshots of when, hey, meet our new whoever. And I did the same thing then for MANA because I was not having a lot of information sent to me by MANA, but I was able to then bring in some of the same information. And I know you just mentioned that we'll get to the MANA info in a minute. So yes, I did add and keyword. And as far as I can find, I added the names of people involved so that we can try and see who was kind of on watch. Then who do we need to get to because somebody has this information, somebody knows what happened. So
Right.
that's why I've gone through and added whether it was a social media thing, whether it was a newsletter, whether it was posted on the website, and then I've added the people's names who were involved each time so we can try and figure out what the common denominators are, so maybe we can go back through. And then I've sent out quite a few requests from information from former MANA board members, in addition to just MANA members. And I was like, hey, if you've got any newsletters from when things happen, because the information on their website was not available, I was able to glean some more. But again, you said that's for later. So I think that's it for
Oh, no,
now.
no, that's okay. So the one question I would have is, did you find in any of your research any announcement of any new FAM board members that have been appointed, or, a search for them, anything that would make us think that there are new board members somewhere overseeing the FAM accounts that were frozen?
There's number one, I talked to a former MANA board member, and they said, well, whoever's on the FAM website. And I'm like, well, it's the same people who were listed in the group, a Facebook group. And I know we had one point in time somebody from MANA saying that I think if I recall correctly, and I have all the screenshots for these, that Deanne had said something, and a former MANA board member said she's not a FAM board member. She doesn't speak for a FAM. I'm like, who is? And there was no response. What we do know is in the state of Connecticut, the people who are recognized as board members are the people who thought they were board members. So the people who are registered agents of FAM are the ones who are listed on the website. Currently still listed on the website. I could find no announcement of new FAM board members. I could find nothing from MANA stating that there was a new FAM board. I could find nothing from MANA. And not that they, I don't have all of their stuff. I don't have anything that was sent to members I by that point wasn't a member anymore. I do have a couple of former members, and I say former members, they were members at the time it folded, and they're looking for any kind of information to know, like, were we told? Because they don't recall being told, but we also, I don't have the same archive of newsletters as I was given access to by FAM. So it's been very hard to put together a timeline when nobody's forthcoming with any information.
That does make it difficult. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything about FAM? And I can't see everybody's hands, so Deb, you might have to help
This
me.
is Deb. So it's occurred to me that I think my involvement during the time that the bank accounts were frozen and that that the decision was made as to who was going to go to the ICM, that material is probably pertinent to the situation. And I've let Lori know that I think it is. I haven't formulated it yet into a way to give it to her. So I'll be doing that in the next week. I'm going to mute myself because my dog's crazy, but I think that, hi, I'm busy. I'm on a call. Bruce, you need my husband? I'm sorry. I live on a beach and people can just walk up and talk to me. It's like, so I think that information is pertinent because we did try in many, I mean, as strategically as we could to get the attention of leadership, both at MEEC, at ICM, and through MANA. And there was no response. It was very, very frustrating. So I think that that's pertinent to the situation, and I will put that together.
Okay, thank you, Deb. And I see that Jade also in the chat said that she'd been able to find that they'd been unable to find anything on current FAM board members, only that they'd been replaced. And I had seen that as well on social media, Facebook comments, but no real clue on who it was that was now in those board positions.
I would like to interject that even if they were posted on social media legally right now, my understanding is the people who are legally listed are the board members legally, whether or not someone has approved them, disapproved them, doesn't like them, thinks their mama's a hoe, whatever. It doesn't matter why they're not listed. It just matters that they aren't. So that's where my brain goes as to how can we get to who thinks they know who's on the board. Why is nobody saying anything?
Correct. The other question I would have,
Sarita, I asked. I said, okay, so the current board members, you guys had a falling out, whatever, fine. I don't want to get involved in your playground politics. Like, who are you going to replace them with? Well, they've just been replaced. Okay, great. Well, how are they selected? Well, they've just been replaced. And I said, well, okay, so how do you guys, like, is this how this is going to go? Like, you guys are just going to take all your toys and go home, you know? And she was like, so what state are you in again? That's what she asked me. What state are you in again? And I just started laughing. I was like, I'm in an unregulated state, so I'm unlicensed. So you can't touch me even if you wanted to.
Right.
And she was like, well, I don't know how this is going to affect you then.
What? That's weird.
Yeah, because apparently traditional midwives, you know, we're gum on the bottom of everybody's shoe, even though I played nice for years and had a CPM. So I just said, okay, Elizabeth, that's great. Like, we'll see what happens eventually. Eventually it's got to shake out, right, guys? Like, eventually it has to shake out.
Right.
Like, eventually somebody has to stand up and either say they're on the new board or the old board is going to get reinstated, or however it's going to come out.
Well, the next
I just think
question,
all the secrecy is odd.
Yes, it always makes red flags go up in my mind. So my question actually, and this is a legal question, and I've had one experienced attorney give me their opinion on looking at the bylaws of FAM, whether or not it can exist once MANA is dissolved. And because FAM was created to be the charitable auxiliary associated with a professional organization. Almost all professional organizations have one of those. although they tend to work a little more collaboratively than FAM and MANA did. And so once MANA, and this was the question before, when a previous FAM board wanted MANA to go away and not be the member anymore, means that the entire bylaws would have to be changed and everything at the IRS would have to be updated to this new organization that no longer had a sole member. And I don't know what that would involve or how, if that's possible. This legal opinion was that it wasn't, that FAM really couldn't exist, especially as it is now, once MAN is dissolved, and that there then would need to be some acknowledgement through the state of Connecticut. And they have, I looked it up, they have a way to file a dissolution online that FAM would need to do that, just like MANA needs to do that in Washington State. So yes, there's paperwork that needs to be done. There's always paper trails when money is involved, whether people like it or not. And there should be some change in the state of Connecticut's government website, either changing the bylaws, telling us who the new members are, or dissolving that foundation.
Yeah, because meanwhile, we're the people who are supposedly on the current FAM board, our butts are in a sling with the IRS because $78,000 is a lot of money.
Well, here's the other thing, and this comes directly off the state of Connecticut's website. And it's about dissolution or closing a business. Even if your business did not make money or file annual reports for several years, it may not be officially closed. Excluding trade names, a business is not closed until a dissolution has been filed. If you receive an annual report reminder from our office, your business is still considered active and may be subject to business entity tax and other fees. So I don't know what the legal ramifications are of allowing that paperwork to continue as is, or the vulnerability of the names of the people whose names are on it. That's something that, I think is going to be a question we need to continue to look at, because you don't need any more danger. So unless anybody else has anything about FAM in particular, I'd just like to take a moment to say something. When we step into leadership roles, especially of a nationally, internationally recognized organization or foundation, we know that we are accepting an obligation of stewardship of those assets. The community acknowledges the integrity of Samsara Therese Morgan, Deanne Graham, Jessalyn Ballerano, Morgan White, Jenny Pagel, Barbara Grace, and Peter Bolick, and thank them for the work they did as members of the FAM board. We hear them when they say they experienced trauma through the actions of the MANA board. The disappointment of having to tell their carefully selected grant recipients that FAM could not fulfill its promised support added insult to their injury. We hear their ongoing sense of stewardship and support a community-required independent audit of all MANA and FAM accounts, including monies frozen at the time of their removal as the FAM board. We ask that the community work to carry forward the essential work that FAM was doing at the time of their removal. So thank you, Barbara, and all of you.
Thank you, Sarita.
Thank you guys so much. And we truly hear you. And actually we've tried to pull together a support team for you with Lori and Lisa, who Lisa Sanderson is here with us today. And at your time of choosing, we can, and working with them with their timelines also and with their availability, we can provide a supported Zoom call for you guys so that your board can come together and find some resolution.
Thanks, guys.
You're good. Yeah, thank you. So take a deep breath. We'll move on to talking about MANA. I know we're running behind, so thank you for everybody for giving us that grace of technology and things we needed to say.
And we do have 2 hours
Oh,
that we
okay.
can Zoom if we need to.
Okay, great. So I wanted to talk for just a moment, any updates that I've seen about MANA. And before I do that, I want people to understand that when I keep coming back to talking about the dysfunctional coping mechanisms, that unless you were on the board and you got to experience some of that culture, it was hard to see from the outside just how toxic it had become in the last years that I know that I was involved in it. People don't know that the 3 presidents before me were either asked to resign, took a leave of absence before their term was up because of the stress of being the president, or was asked to resign by the board through a vote of no confidence. I was removed through a defamation online campaign. The next president after me resigned before her term was up. And the next president was the last one who was part of dissolving the organization before her term was up. So it had gotten to the point where being on the MANA board was dangerous for your soul in a lot of different ways. And I think a lot of people didn't understand that. It was, of course, one of the reasons why it was really hard to find people that wanted to be on that MANA board. And it was a culture that no matter how much we tried to change it, wasn't going to be changed. And I believe that it wasn't going to be changed because the seed of that was really there from the beginning. No matter how good it looked, no matter how wonderful it was, no matter how excited we were to have this international organization, what we maybe didn't understand is that to even be part of something like this, to be part of a movement like this, required some level of privilege, either privilege from our skin color, privilege from the fact that we didn't have the same legal vulnerabilities that many marginalized communities did, privilege in the form of financial ability to travel to conferences, to travel to even be a board member, because you had to be able to, you were supposed to do fundraising in your community and bring money into the organization and then be able to travel around the country to meetings. And so we need to understand that from the beginning, and it was unintentional consequences. It wasn't because necessarily a group of people set out to make it that way, but that because we didn't understand, we really did have a foundation that allowed people with privilege to have more power in the decision making and in the representation. And that ultimately, as those bylaws fell apart that I talked about last week, it was that seed that caused the disruption around the social justice agenda and a lot of the trying to deal with racism and cultural incompetency. It really brought out more and more and more of the violence that finally became evident that that privilege wasn't going to go anywhere. So that's my take, even though I had a really good time at a lot of the events and a really good time with a lot of the people I met and a lot of really good time at a lot of the annual conferences. It's my understanding, by the time the organization left, and I've heard this from a couple of different people that I can't document, was that really there were very few members involved. And I'd say the majority of those were the lifetime members that had given themselves to the organization through donations and or being president. I have communicated again with Scott Hoppala, the agent in the state of Washington. I noticed in the timeline, and Laura, you can talk about this in a minute, that there were a lot of times when MANA's annual report in that state was past due, and and that actually was why I chose to reach out and hire somebody like Scott, because that left somebody that was responsible in the state that could always, file those annual reports, because the state requires those things. MANA often fell behind on that because we were a group of volunteers depending on each other. And if you didn't live in Washington state, you didn't necessarily, you didn't actually get that done. The only thing Scott could tell me, and I did not get any response from Becky Coolidge, the president of MANA, in terms of asking her to join us in these conversations or to answer questions. What Scott did say, and of course, you know, he is an employee of MANA, is that we should expect an announcement soon. And that's just what I keep getting told by everybody, to expect an announcement soon. What that announcement what that means or what that entails, I have no idea. But that's what I've been told. So that's before we move into MANA stats, that's just about MANA. I have seen that the merchandise, some of the merchandise is being sold online, sort of an online yard sale. That's, you know, that's one of the things you have to do, is disperse the assets. Lori, do you want to talk about anything you found, or does anybody else have any updates about anything?
I'll let anyone else who has anything go first. My stuff is pretty dry, but sure.
Let's see, I don't see any hands anywhere.
Sarita, can I
Yeah.
just ask who were the three presidents in order before you again?
Jill Breen,
Okay,
Marina Farrell,
okay,
Vicki Headley.
okay. Thank you. That's what I had. Just wanted to check.
And then Sarah Foster after me.
Right.
All right, Lori, give us the dry stuff.
Sure. Basically what I was able to do, other than like I said, I went through and I added names to a lot of this because I was trying to figure out who's who and what's what, and so much overlap in some places that I was losing track. So I added keyword tags. Basically, I added names so you can scroll now. If you were to go to the timeline, and I don't know, you don't have to go there now. It's a little bit slow to load. I did not make it to be a giant database. I didn't know. I thought it was going to be a couple of things like who was who and who came first and what's on second, and I don't know, is on third is where we are. But what I saw was that it was going to become bigger, and I have not had time to set it up as a relational database, which is what I would have done had I realized how big it was going to be. So I apologize for how slowly it loads. If anyone is trying to read it and you don't see all the way to yesterday in your timeline, then you may have to click on the load more, because the only thing I was able to do to not make it so slow is to add where it only loads a certain amount at a time, because otherwise the server was being overwhelmed by all the information. So what I have added in addition to keywords is, if you look down through the tags, you will see, and Barbara, like the information you were just asking, you can look through the FAM and MANA information, because I was able to find the MANA didn't share this with me. I was just able to get on the Washington website, and each year when an annual report was filed, I put down the names of who signed it. So I have that listing now. And then I have the information that I got from the Wayback Machine, which is the only option I have right now for the MANA website. I don't have any of their newsletters or any of their website archive. I was talking with someone this week. We're hoping, without getting too technical, the website is gone. It was sold to somebody else. It did not get hacked. It expired. It was expired because somebody didn't know, probably, that they had to pay that bill. And that's the kind of thing that happens when things are in disarray. So that's, again, one of the unfortunate side effects. Is I don't believe there was any nefarious intent. I don't think anyone was, oh, let's let it go. I do know that somebody didn't pay the bill. It's just that straightforward. So a website that they had registered since 1998 was not paid. And after 45 days, I believe it was then released for auction. And I do have screenshots on the timeline of when it was being wonky, which meant the databases were no longer connected. There were some graphics and a whole bunch of weird errors. The Wayback Machine did categorize all that, or catalog all of that. And then when it went up for auction, and I at one point in time brought that to the FAM board, not to the FAM board, but to people. I guess I put it in Midwives Anonymous, actually, I believe. And I was like, hey, what's happening? Where is it? I had gone looking, because when I have future students come to me, they often ask me about the laws in their state. And I used to always point them to a page at MANA, and none of those links were working. And I was literally looking to say, like, what's going on? And when they said, oh no, the website's been down for a while, I actually did a quick search and found that it had expired. And I kind of was like, oh no. So I brought it to the attention of the person who had responded. I think that may have been Deanne, had responded to me on Midwives Anonymous and said, what does that mean? And I was like, well, it's up for sale now. So at that point in time, I believe it was her or somebody from FAM. I don't know who it was actually. I shouldn't say that it was her. I just know I talked to her, and then FAM posted the fact that it was up for auction, and it was going for a pretty high price. It would, because the older a website name is, the higher it shows in a search. So I'm going to try to see, and if I get too technical, Sri, just reach out and smack me here. Like, when you set up a website that's going to get pays per click, the older your site is, the higher you're going to be in the search rankings, the more money you're going to make. So it would make perfect sense with words like pregnancy and birth on a website that had been available since 1998. That is actually in real estate, that's Fifth Avenue. So unfortunately, Fifth Avenue got abandoned and it was purchased by somebody who came along and paid for it. I don't know what they paid. What we know is that bots were able to take it over. The way you know they're bots is if you go to the Manna website now, you can see every kind of little clickbait. What kind of berries should you drink in pregnancy when you're getting ready to give birth? What kind of exercise should you do? It's all just the kind of things that AI generates when you make a website about this. So let me recap, is that there was no nefarious purpose that I can tell, and it did expire and it was just gone. My concern, and this is where I really want to dial in, is that if Manna Stats was funded by FAM grants, which is what I have been told, what is going to happen to FAM Stats when that money doesn't come through? It's been most of a year now since the bills were being paid. Is Manna Stats on the line? And we can't figure out who knows. And my concern is that a bunch of data that could be really, really excellent for researchers, for midwives, for families, is going to be lost. So I'm very selfish in this because I don't want those to disappear. And literally, it's just like a personal selfishness that I have some of the tech skills. So I started trying to figure out, like, how do we know these aren't going to just disappear? How do we know their hosting bill isn't just going to not be paid? And that's one of my main things. If anybody knows who to talk to, who was in charge of that, who should have known, even if it was 2 people back, that. Okay, so I am trying to add that kind of stuff to the timeline so that we can make sure that here, now that we're almost a year out, we don't want Manna Stats to just disappear. So, okay, that was,
that's a perfect segue.
Okay,
perfect
cool.
segue. And while I will agree, I want to go back for just a minute. While I will agree there was not necessarily anything nefarious, that what I do know is that there was negligence, because when I was president, before being removed, which was for 1.5 years, the treasurer, who continued to be the treasurer throughout the following years and was on the letter of dissolution that went to the public, was assigned the task of telling the board all of the different monthly bills that were paid automatically, what they were for, and what we could get rid of because we were losing money. So that same person paid those bills before, and those bills weren't paid, as you say, in those last 2 years or the last year. So chaos, yes, it was chaos, but it wasn't because the information wasn't available, or it wasn't because, Chet just went over. It wasn't because there wasn't anybody there that knew the information. The information was readily available and in the accounting. So it's unfortunate that that happened. I will say that as far as I recall from my remembrance, The website for Mana Stats is completely separate, was completely separate from the Mana website, which we had a couple of different companies, one in particular we worked with that managed that website for us, and it was going to have to be updated because it was becoming obsolete. So it shouldn't have any effect on the Mana Stats Plus website, which was more under the management of the developers who are which they've sent a message again, and I'll get to that in a minute. My question to you, Lori, would be, did you see anywhere, as we move into talking about Mana Stats, did you see any announcements from the Mana board as to a team that had been created to oversee the Mana Stats, or who the people were that were now doing the work to keep the project going? Do you remember anything, any announcements?
I was gonna say, I feel like that's a trick question because I haven't heard anything from
I was hoping that maybe in your research you found something, you know.
No, what I did find, and I did end up talking to someone who was on the board when it folded. She's deciding how much she is able to say, so we're not gonna bring her into this right now. I'm all about consent. But what I do know is that her understanding was that the Mana Stats were previously paid for by FAM grants. So she was not sure what happens with them now. If FAM in fact was paying that bill and FAM can't access funds, are the people who are running Mana Stats right now, are they generating income and bringing in, you know, I don't know who's qualified to be answered. Is Mana Stats getting registration fees? Are they self-supporting now? Like, no, nobody seems to know. And that's concerning to me. But I have not heard from anyone about, well, literally all the stuff that I have is on the timeline. If it's not on the timeline, I haven't found it. If there is something out there that anyone has, and again, I've sent out a plea to former members who were members but not board members to say, could you look through your email? Do you have any newsletters, any kind of announcements, any kind of anything? Because it would be good to figure out, because before Mana Stats, and I don't know, I don't mean to sound scary, but before Mana Stats disappear, let's figure out and stop that from happening. So that's kind of where we are.
Got it. Thank you. So there appears to be another message, which is there should be an announcement soon, is the only thing I've been able to actually find out about Mana Stats. I wanted to give a brief history so people understand that project. It's been around for quite some time, and originally you contributed to it through paper, you know, so you can imagine the work that went into, and it was all volunteers, collating that data that came in on all those pieces of paper into some type of a database that could be used in some reasonable way. And there was conflict early on in the Division of Research. There was actually a court case that was settled out of court. A lot of people didn't know about that. And the question around that was who owned the data, and was that separate from who owned the database? And the settlement out of court really was that Mana owned the database. It was an asset of the organization. And the researchers that were on the other side of that case were given access to the data that they were involved in, which made sense. And that's how it was settled. As the Division of Research moved forward, there became, it was really hard to understand a lot of times. I know when I came on the board, and I really simplified it to, you had volunteers that were data in, and you had volunteers that were data out. And I didn't totally understand what they did until I did a lot of work with the current database developers to understand that it was because this amazing software project that was created by some midwifery support, or that the whole thing that was put together by these brilliant midwifery supporters was at the time considered quite artisanal, right? Like it was this pretty amazing database. It was on and I am way above my head when I'm saying this stuff. Lori probably knows what I'm talking about. It was on a program called Ruby on Rails, which became obsolete. the problem with Ruby on Rails was it couldn't be hooked into any of the like the electronic health records. You couldn't just build a bridge and push a button so that all your data went into the database. There were a lot of limitations because it was on Ruby on Rails. And one of the things was it replaced Python. I don't even know what Python is, Lori. So one of the things that made Ruby on Rails difficult was that it required so much volunteer, human hours to be able to keep it running. Because of that, it really was never created to do its capability from the beginning was limited to putting your data in for your individual practice or group practice and being able to get the stats back out for that practice. It was never created to easily do an annual report for the entire database or for the entire profession. It was never created to allow researchers to easily access the data, which is why when researchers began to do that, they had to have a team of, because it was very labor intensive, of putting all that data together to make sense of it, to clean it, to make sure it was valid, and to be able to make sure it was usable. That wound up meaning that the researchers involved in the division of research had some rights to and laid claim to the clean data, and that really limited the number of researchers that could use it. So one of our visions that Amanda and I really worked on was creating a database that could, number one, never cost anything to the contributors, right? Like you can't charge people to contribute the data because that's going to make the data kind of skewed immediately. Like we have to think about keeping this data valid. And even having a professional organization own the database was questionable, right? Because we're proving we're good, and that's some conflict of interest. So there was a lot of guardrails put in place in the project to try to be able to answer that criticism. So anyway, this new database, which was uniquely built for this project, would allow, with the touch of a button, someone to not just get their stats, but be able to have, have a comparison with the national average, or be able to have some products that they could pay for, not to contribute their data, but to have products they could use to promote their practices, to be able to hand to their clients. These are our stats. This is how it compares to, my state, my nation. There were various options. And then, of course, there's a whole new thing and a whole different level around how researchers can access the data in a way that their research stays valid. And there's different levels of that. So I knew it was a really big project. I know the funding is really what's needed to develop it. Like we had a committee of fundraisers that were working to apply for grants when I was removed. And then I don't think any more of that was done. So that was one of the ways we were looking to fund this migration. FAM had funded it many, many times over the years, but hadn't had any money to give to the project recently enough that we were having to do this bigger fundraising and grant writing project to be able to fund the whole thing. How the developers got paid, what happened after I left, I have no idea, but I know that there were fairly good sized bills to be paid. And I know that if they don't get paid, we can't expect people to keep volunteering, and we certainly can't expect the developers and the software managers to, to continue to volunteer. Money's going to have to be raised, and, grants are going to have to be written. The reason I asked about, so Amanda Tay and I spent a lot of time in the spring of 2021, I believe it was, really going through all the minutes, really understanding what the project wanted, what had happened up to that point. And we spent hours, like all day Friday, every Friday for about 3 or 4 months. And we had a public, sort of by invitation only, I guess it would be, we had a demonstration where we invited NARM board members and other midwifery leaders and past MANA midwifery leaders to see the potential of this new project so we could get community engagement. And then I was removed the next month, so I don't know what happened after that. I know we had a lot of momentum. It's my understanding that that momentum may not have been carried forward. The reason I asked about any announcements was because I was on a social media midwives page, and there were a lot of questions about Manastats, and people were saying, well, it doesn't exist anymore and I can't get any answers. And there were all kinds of different, you know, how it always goes. When this one person answered and said, oh yes, it's thriving and we have it going and you can just contact me if you have any questions. And that had been a while ago, and I just kind of did that screenshot, kept that, and just recently I contacted her. I said, hey, you know, can you join us this Thursday, and or would you be willing to answer some questions? She indicated that they have a team. It's my understanding there's 3 people. I have no idea who else is on it. I have no idea how that team was created or the criteria for being on the team. And in response to my many questions, which were funding, ownership, what came back was there'll be an announcement soon. And that's all I can get. I will say that Amanda, the developer, said, and she, you know, confirmed that there is a team, that this person was on a team and is working, volunteer. Again, we have volunteers working. And what Amanda said is we can share that the registry and services are thriving, and to thank the community of contributors, encourage continued enrollment and continued contribution of data. And that's all I got. That's all I got on Manastats. There should be an announcement soon. What that means, I don't know. And there hasn't been any, you know, any more official filing of articles or plan of dissolution in the state of Washington. So I don't really have anything more to say about that.
I verified that as of yesterday evening at 7-ish Eastern Standard Time that there was no dissolution as of then. So I did go back and check to make sure I've got current data. If it was dissolved since then, I don't have that data yet.
So when you ask, is enrollment paying the bills? Enrollment, what do you mean enrollment in?
You mentioned that their enrollment is good on Manastats.
Right.
So
you know, there's no cost to enroll.
Right. So it goes back to how's their hosting and their team going to be paid, because this is why I'm feeling the urgency now that it's been almost a year since managed site just went poof. Like, where are the stats and how can we make sure they are safe?
Right. So those are good questions. There should be an announcement soon. Sorry, I don't mean to sound snarky, but that's all I can get. What I will say is, because that was one of our goals when Amanda and I were envisioning this project, that was the question we kept saying is, how can it be sustainable? Because it costs money to have somebody, you know, hold the database and, you know, the manager and all those things. And so we knew that at the beginning, it was going to have to be grants, donations, you know, those kinds of things, which it always has been. As we began to work into those other possibilities, like, you know, you can have this, your nice description of your practice with your picture and your practice stats. Like, it wasn't just a blank piece of paper with numbers on it. It was a shiny product. That those things would be a yearly subscription. That money from being able to subscribe and purchase products that came as a result of the data would be one area of income. Another one we looked at was, you know, how researchers are charged for access to data, you know, how that can be. The one thing, and I see in your question, you're talking about, you know, it's tricky because people that are contributing need to be protected. And that was always a priority of MANA's division of research, that the contributor, that there was a separation between who was contributing and what their data was. Now that separation, of course, meant that somewhere there was a key to all of how the connections worked. And that was kept very, very, very safely. And like, I have no even idea where it would be now. So that's a key element for midwifery, is knowing that the data is not that the data is safe, that's one thing, but that the contributor of the data is safe from it being used in any way against them. So I think that what I've been trying to tell the people that I'm communicating with, like Amanda, is that we really appreciate and are relieved to know that this project is thriving. Like every time she tells me it's thriving, I'm like, shoo, because I believe her, and she has a lot of integrity and professionalism and I totally believe her. And when she says to me, you know, tell people keep contributing and to enroll, then my next thing is, well, to make that really happen and be sustainable, there's going to have to be transparency and communication, because there was already distrust of this project, people being afraid to enter their stats whenever they were in an unregulated state. And that, you know, that's hard enough to get past. All the rest of this chaos and lack of transparency hasn't done anything to improve that. To Jade's thing, what state am I in? I'm in a state of confusion and distrust right at the moment, right? Like I don't like those states to be in. I don't like to be confused. I don't like to not trust what's going on. And I'm really looking forward to these announcements. And I'm really looking forward to the, you know, hopefully that everybody's questions will be answered. So that's my take on MANA stats, what I know at this point. Did I answer questions? Anybody else have any? It's really complicated. Yeah, if the hosting goes unpaid and that is abandoned, that safety is not guaranteed. Exactly. The money has to be raised to support this project. And that's one of the considerations that should be happening in choosing what organization is going to take over ownership, is how they then, what their plan is for funding it so that it'll be sustained. And then there's the whole other things is, you know, right now we have certain, what are they called, instruments, and they ask certain questions. Somewhere along the way, do we want those questions to be different? Do we want more questions to be on there? Like those questions were streamlined by one researcher for particular reasons. Do we need to, you know, like there's a lot of things that could go on with a database that has this kind of potential. Okay, so anything else? Anything else we need to talk about? I'm ready to go outside as soon as we finish here. It's a beautiful day.
To sum it up, Sarita, it sounds to me like announcements are coming.
Yes, soon.
Okay. All righty. And so just to let you guys know, the next meeting that we're going to have next Thursday is going to be talking about next steps. And so in the time period between now and next week, we'll be fishing on the What Happened to MANA page as to your guys' suggestions and input. I know that some people are just can't be with us live every Thursday, so they're watching these, and I really appreciate Lori's been getting them up in a really timely fashion, despite my dysfunction at being able to do this. So so hopefully we'll have some action steps that we can take out of the next meeting, and hopefully Rowan might be able to speak with us a bit about the Trust Birth organization. Oh, you won't be able to be here.
I'll be working.
Okay. Well, maybe Sarita will be able to, or somebody will talk about next steps and some structures that we might be able to revive to help us.
I think it would be interesting to have a list. Maybe we could be ready to add it into a chat of the organizations that currently exist. Because I've been seeing several here recently that I didn't know about, and you know, it would just be interesting to see what's already out there.
Yeah, Sarita, I agree. I would like to see that. I was actually thinking about putting something together, maybe to share at a future meeting. I mean, after this Thursday series is over, I'd be willing to host a couple, looking at some of the more granular things that have come up from this big picture that you've given us.
Excellent.
Even, okay, this idea of what's happening with MANA stats. Well, are we having a put our eggs in one basket syndrome? Is that something we need to look at and correct? What would it look like if we had more ecosystem of organizations and research and stat gathering where it was more distributed?
Beautiful.
So things like that to think about.
Beautiful.
Love that, Sharon. That would help so much.
Yeah, we were hoping someone like you would make some volunteer offers to continue hosting discussions. So, we'll talk more about what that's going to look like next week.
That'd be great. We'll definitely put you on the agenda for next week, Sharon, and if you
Sounds good.
want to present. And maybe what we'll try to, what I'm hearing is we'll try to identify some other organizations that might be vehicles that we can move our energies over to or help develop, so that we feel like we're moving forward and getting this important work done, because I think all of us agree what FAM was focused on is the direction that we'd like to be moving, and we'd like to feel like our work is making a difference. So, all right, sounds good. So,
you have invited Shannon Mitchell to any of these, but she is looking for midwifery today to pick up some of this mantle. She is the call, and she is, I think they're going to be discussing it at the midwifery. I know she's very right now with the conference coming up the weekend of May 5th, but they are planning on discussing what they can do from there, from that conference.
awesome. Yeah. And
Perfect.
Shannon has been invited, and I think she is watching these, but not able to participate. So that'd be great. All righty. So Lori, do you want to help us wrap up?
Sure. Basically, as you guys could tell, I do not have a poker face. I sure had some frustrations come up as I heard some of these things. Like, what do you mean? That doesn't even. And so, any of those feelings that, like, how can we get this back on the rails? How can we trust that our community members will be safe? How can we come together when there is such a feeling of distrust? And when I'm saying it's not nefarious and you're saying it was just so unorganized, and at some point in time the frustration that it just wasn't taken care of, and without that transparency no one else could step up to take care of it. So those are the things I've heard, and if anyone's got anything more, feel free to tap it in the chat too. We're just going to do a quick deep breath. Anything about what we've learned, anything about what we are going to learn, any part of the frustrations that we have over what seems like an absolutely insurmountable task right now. All of that is getting our intention and our focus. Any way that we've contributed to dysfunction, any way that we have hurt others, hurt ourselves, any way that we have contributed in ways that have muddied the waters, any way that we have kept ourselves from being able to move forward, any way that we've kept communities from moving forward because of our own inability to take a step. May we all look around and see the people next to us stepping forward as well, because if we can step forward together, it makes everybody's step more powerful. If you have anything that comes up during this next week, please feel free to write to me. In the meantime, we've got a couple of things to put into our intention moving forward. How can we create safety? How can we actually get accountability? Birth is sacred, and as birth helpers, we have to walk in that same space. Absolutely. We cannot create an energy around our interactions with each other, our interactions with the families we serve, and come to one another from a different place. We have to be able to be in integrity with our energy on all of these levels. You cannot train somebody from a place of trauma and then ask them to go forward and not perpetuate the trauma. We have got to come from a place of healing and a place of connection, a place of collaboration, a place of community. Without those things, we're not going to be able to create a place that reflects those same things. We are going to all have to consciously work on anything that keeps us from being able to be there, whether that's trauma that's happening because of this or whether it's triggering other things in our lives. We're going to have to take time and look at those things. We cannot be the perpetuators of trauma if we're going to help try to create a healed system. And when I say a healed system, I should say a healing system, because none of us are completely healed. We are all healing, but only when we really, really set our intention that way. It's so easy to let our programming take over. It's so easy to believe the stories we've heard. All you have to do is talk to 3 random people about pregnancy and birth and whether it's scary to hear how much we have strayed from trusting ourselves and our bodies, our physiology, and our community. You only need to look at the number of lawyers that the sole business is finding fault with protocols that were set up because of trauma. Pretty much every protocol in allopathic medicine right now is set up because of trauma, and we don't want to create another one of that. We don't need that. We don't need the one we have. We sure don't need another one. So may we all go forward, healing, and as healers, may we all go forward to continue to create peace in our communities. Many, many thanks and many blessings to each of you for being here and for working to take these next steps as we figure out how we can each be a healer and a supporter in our communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. That was sweet. Okay, so we're gonna wrap this up for today and we'll get it out as soon as possible. Appreciate all of you guys who have taken the journey with us. Thanks, Lisa, for coming over. Appreciate that a lot. And Barbara, I'm glad if anything comes to your mind that you didn't get to say that needs to be said for FAM, please, yeah, get that to us. And we really appreciate, I think, did Sharon, I think her name was Sharon, did she leave? I think she left, but hopefully we'll connect with her and get her on board on the agenda for next week. That would be fabulous. All righty, take care, everyone. Have a good week. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, lovies.